All right, well, welcome. Hi, everybody. Thank you all so much for making the time to be here for part of this, or for this two-part workshop on serving linguistically diverse families with story time. And thank you, Kim, and to the Connecticut State Library for inviting me to be able to spend this time with you all today. It's definitely an honor and a privilege. So I wanted to kick our session off today with this quote from Kimberly Crenshaw, who, even if you don't recognize her name, you might recognize some of her work. She's coined as being the Black feminist, or recognized as being the Black feminist scholar who coined the term intersectionality, which is probably familiar to a lot of people. And the quote is, "Treating different things the same can generate as much an inequality as treating the same things differently." So part one of our two-part workshop series today is really going to be focused on outreach and on kind of shifting our paradigm around access models. And and so that's the context in which I'm offering this quote, just kind of for your own reflection on your work, within this within this area of library service. So I'll just read it again one more time. "Treating different things the same can generate as much an inequality as treating the same things differently." So I'm going to make you all a couple of promises. So these are going to kind of be divided out in terms of privilege and marginalization. So we all have areas where we have more privilege than others, and where we have less privilege than others, or where we're more marginalized. So in the context of this session, being a little bit more specific about what I mean when I say people of privilege, we're talking about library services to immigrant communities, to folks who have cultural and ethnic heritage outside of the dominant group, to folks who are most comfortable speaking a language other than English. And so, if those aren't our experience, if we align more with the dominant group, we don't have the immigrant experience in our life story, and we grew up speaking English, then, in this context, we have more privilege. And so some of the things that we're going to be talking about today might make you feel a little bit uncomfortable. And honestly, I hope that they do, because I really feel like if I don't make anyone feel uncomfortable at all in today's session, that I've failed you. I've failed you in my job. To have success in reaching communities and serving communities that currently we aren't reaching and serving, we need to have some change in how we think about how we operate, and some change in the status quo. And that's not necessarily always a comfortable process, right? What I want everyone to know is that I am convinced that everyone who is dedicating their time to be here today is doing so because you really care. You really care about making sure that everyone in your community has equitable access to your library and its services and to information broadly. You know, so that's the belief that I have in you. So even if something makes you feel uncomfortable, know that it is not um, in any way an attack or you know, some sort of you know, I don't know, me standing up on my soapbox and pointing out other people's deficiencies or something like that. Like that's not in any way the perspective that I would be coming from. But like I said, I do feel a responsibility to present some things that, you know, invite us to think about what we do from other perspectives. So sometimes when we feel uncomfortable, um, you know, we can get a little bit defensive or start to shut down a little bit. So my invitation to you is that if you notice that happening for yourself, try to lean into it and just be curious and come back to having an open mind around what it is that that you're hearing and what we're discussing. And for the context of today, when I say marginalized people, I mean folks who, you know, do have the immigrant experience in their life story or did grow up speaking languages other than English or are part of a cultural or religious or ethnic group that falls out of the majority, out of the dominant group. And what I want to promise to you all is that you are not going to be asked in this session to um, educate others about your experience or to be like the sole representative of an entire group. Um, if you do choose to share anything from your experience when we have opportunities for discussion and whatnot, even if it's something that challenges me, I want you to know that I received that as a gift. You know, that shows a level of trust and a level of safety when one is willing to be so vulnerable as to share their personal experiences, and I don't take that lightly. In fact, it's deeply appreciated. So these are my promises to you, and I hope that we can stick to them as promises to each other for the duration of our workshop as well. So you could be looking at me in your screen and be thinking like, why is this blonde-haired, blue-eyed white girl like here to talk to us about immigrants and how to serve diverse communities? And that is totally fair. So I want to tell you a little bit about who I am, my experience, just sort of so you know the perspective that I'm bringing to the table. So my name is Katie Scherrer, and I live in Lexington, Kentucky. I do have my MLIS, and I worked in public libraries in Ohio and also in Kentucky in different kinds of systems in terms of size and internal culture and a lot of other different things. And my career was largely focused, I would say almost entirely focused on serving Latinx and Spanish-speaking immigrant families. I didn't plan that. That happened really by accident. So I learned Spanish in my late teens, early 20s when I was in college. I grew up in southeastern Ohio, very rural, graduating high school class of 200. Like there was like 2 minority folks in our entire graduating class. So very homogenous white community in the Appalachian foothills where was where I grew up and kind of what my cultural background is. But I did learn Spanish, and then I started working in a public library in the mid 2000s in a big city in Ohio where there were almost no Spanish speaking staff in a system of like 800 staff. And there was a large and growing first generation Spanish speaking immigrant community there. And it just, once folks realized that I spoke Spanish, it totally changed the course of my career. I mean, I honestly didn't even think, I took this job working at the public library sort of on a whim. And it was this experience of working with uh, Latino immigrant communities that really made me even want to become a librarian. Um, so I worked in two really different systems. The first system that I worked in is, I would say, in many ways typical of what I see of a lot of public libraries, where they knew there was a dramatically underserved um, Latinx Spanish-speaking population, but they were just really, really, really struggling to connect with that population. And then I've also had the experience working in a much smaller library at a very specific branch here in Lexington, Kentucky. It was my last library job before I started working independently. That was truly the heart and soul of the Latino community here in Lexington. And all of the staff were bilingual and or bicultural. And so, I mean, it was a small staff, but in the same building, I went from being like the one Spanish speaking staff person trying to do outreach to a city of 2 million people, to being in a very small branch in a much smaller city with folks who were from Venezuela, Peru, Cuba, the Dominican Republic, Mexico, second, third generation heritage, even. So those two experiences that I had really helped me to understand what the sticking points are when a lot of organizations are trying to do outreach to Latino and Spanish speaking communities, but they're just not gaining traction. And so I have written a couple books for ALA. This is one of them. I wrote it with Jamie Campbell Naidu, Once Upon a Cuento, Bilingual Storytimes in English and Spanish, that came out in 2016. I've been an independent consultant since 2012, working with libraries all across the country. So from coast to coast, big, small, urban, rural, traditional, progressive, I mean, everything in between, on these topics around outreach and bilingual programming, as well as other things I'm passionate about. And one other thing to share about me, and just kind of like my professional perspective, is that I'm also the founder of Story, Songs, and Stretches, which is a school readiness initiative to use intentional movement and mindfulness to enhance school learning or school readiness, as well as to buffer against the negative effects of trauma in various communities. So that's kind of where I'm coming from. I'm an outsider to the Latino community. I grew up as white can be, like in how I grew up. I didn't learn a second language. Well, I learned German in high school, but like I never used it, so, but I didn't develop my Spanish language skills until I was in my early adulthood. And I, yet, these things that I could have never predicted, and these things that would seem as impediments, just wound up taking my library career in these incredible directions. And so, yeah, that's what I'm here to talk to you all about today. Now, I want to say before I move on here that my experience as I'm explaining is almost predominantly in terms of frontline service. You know, what I actually did as a librarian was pretty much predominantly in working with first generation Spanish speaking immigrants, mostly from Mexico and Central America. Um, However, um, you know, we're talking today not just about serving Latino and Spanish speaking communities, but about serving any communities that speak languages other than English, any immigrant communities. And so I really want to just encourage those of you, you know, a lot of what I'm going to be talking about in terms of outreach, I suspect and have had confirmed by colleagues that work with other communities, is relevant. Right? Like a lot of it is going to translate over to other communities, but not everything. And there, I'm sure, will be things that I just simply don't know. So for those of you who are working with immigrant communities from India or Nepal, or from Vietnam, or from different African countries, or wherever else, you know, if something that I say resonates as like, yes, I see this as well, you know, please feel free to share that in the chat. And if something resonates as, you know, it's actually what I see in my community that I'm serving is slightly different, please feel free to share that in the chat as well. I'll be keeping an eye on the chat, and you can send things to everyone as well as sending things to me directly if you would prefer not for it to go to the full group. So I might chime in and share some of those comments. And in terms of questions, we'll have about halfway through, we'll kind of have a little check-in for some questions and comments, and then we'll have time at the end for questions and comments as well. So I won't really be responding to questions as we go along, but I will kind of try to keep an eye on what people are sharing if they're working with another immigrant community. One more thing, when I'm talking about, you know, talking from my experience about serving Latinx communities, you're going to hear a bunch of different terms. And so I just want to do a very quick rundown on what those terms are, because I think it's something that can be confusing for people that we don't always feel comfortable asking about. So Hispanic is a term that was created by the U.S. Census Bureau, I think in the 80s, but I might be slightly off on that in terms of dates, to establish an ethnic group among all people whose heritage originates from Spanish-speaking countries. So that's where Hispanic comes from. Latino is a term that is a self-describer, used to refer to folks whose heritage comes from any Latin American countries. So with Hispanic, being technical here, you know, Hispanic referring to heritage from any Spanish-speaking community or countries, that would include Spain, but not include Brazil. Whereas Latino refers to a common heritage among folks from different Latin American countries, which would not include Spain and would include Brazil, for example. So those are some of those distinctions. Latinx is a more gender inclusive version of Latino that has been really gaining traction in recent years. So that's the term that I generally try to use. But you will also hear me, like especially if I'm talking about, information in a specific report that uses Latino or uses Hispanic, you'll hear me use that terminology. If I'm talking specifically about um, uh, uh, the main characteristic of the group being that they speak Spanish and speak little or no English, then I might say Spanish speaking. So all of those terms are nuanced, but I just kind of want to put that out there around like what each one is kind of referring to. Also, our title today is Serving Linguistically Diverse Families with Storytime, and not all linguistically diverse families are immigrants, right? And not all immigrants you know, lack Spanish language, or I'm sorry, lack English language skills. But I know from my conversations with Kim and from some of the research that I've done and your state data and what I heard from you all in the survey that what a lot of what we're talking about is around serving immigrant communities. And so you might hear me use that as a shorthand just because it's a little bit less cumbersome than linguistically diverse. So that's about me. Now let's talk a little bit about you guys, right? So I'm going to give you guys some feedback or just kind of share with you some of the key results of what you shared with me in the pre-workshop survey, which was really helpful. So thank you all so much to those of you who took the time to complete that. This graphic or these graphics on this slide just show a little bit of information about where immigrants in the New Haven region of Connecticut are coming from, and also what immigrants in the state of Connecticut are contributing to the economy. And here I'll point out that on the handout that I created for you all, there is a section towards the beginning that is about Connecticut specific data and Connecticut specific resources. So those things are linked for you on the handout to explore more on your own. So, you know, why, so this workshop series originally started kind of around bilingual story time. And I don't really like to train or talk about bilingual story time at all without also talking about outreach, because I think it's such an incredibly important and overlooked part of the process, which is why we have the whole session today dedicated to this topic. But I know that a lot of you who are with us, you are wanting to start a bilingual story time, or at least be more inclusive of other languages and other cultures when you're already established story times. So why is it that you want to do that? Why do you want to have a bilingual story time? And by and large, most of you said that you want to do this in order to support early literacy and school readiness. Among folks who speak languages other than English in your community. Um, some of you also said that we've already got folks who speak languages other than English using our library, and we want to either offer or improve our programming for those families. When it comes to language, the overwhelming majority of you all, 87%, are either planning to use Spanish in your bilingual story time, or Spanish and another language. So that definitely aligns with what I'm most experienced with, but I do want you to know that our second session, when we get more into the nuts and bolts of bilingual storytime programming, it won't only be limited to English plus Spanish. We'll try to have a diversity of ethnic groups and languages that are represented in the materials and resources that are shared there. When it comes to outreach, currently happening within your libraries and already established relationships, personal or professional, within the target community that you are really hoping that your bilingual story time is going to serve, the families you're wanting to reach. Not a lot going on there. So 83% of folks said that they either didn't know if there was any outreach or that there was not any outreach going on within their library to this community that they're hoping to serve. And 70% said that they don't currently have any existing professional contacts or relationships within that targeted community. I asked you all about challenges that you anticipate with your, with your bilingual story time, and a lot of these, they're what we would expect, right? Language barrier, cultural barriers, some nervousness and discomfort, just around like, am I going to do this right? Um, if I make all this effort to launch this program, is anyone even going to come? And then of course the curveball that we are all living within, that is COVID-19, and how that affects literally everything that we do, right? And when I asked you all about desired takeaways, what specifically are you hoping to gain by being here? A lot of you are really looking for those storytime skills. So general storytime skills, guidance on how to incorporate another language into storytime, suggestions of specific materials and books and songs and resources that you can use and all of that. And I promise, workshop 2 is going to be totally dedicated to all of that stuff. The other big category of things that you all had concerns about and what you were looking for falls into the context of what it is that we're talking about today, which is outreach. I'm an outsider to this group that I'm trying to serve. How can I form relationships? I don't speak the language. How do I get the word out? How do I market? All of those kinds of things kind of fall under this rubric of outreach strategies. So here's where we're going today. Outreach is, as I see it, and we'll be talking about it today. Well, let me rephrase this. Let me start over. If we want to have a bilingual story time, or even a monolingual story time in another language, in order to provide service to a community that is not yet making those connections with the library, or that the library is not yet finding success in connecting with, outreach is an essential piece of how we set that story time up for success. So that's really what this is all about. You can think about it if you are like, oh, but I really want this story time stuff, I do too. It's really fun to talk about, who doesn't love to share books and songs and things, it's great. So, but if I just give you all of this and then don't talk at all about the outreach, I'm not helping you. I just can't overstate how integral outreach is to set a bilingual story time up for success. It's imperative. So we're going to develop an understanding of why that outreach is necessary and what kind of barriers to access exist that keep us from connecting with the communities that we're hoping to serve. I'm going to give you specific steps for beginning your outreach. I've got 3 beginning specific ideas of where are the places to start, and then intermixed through all of that will be case studies and examples of of ways that outreach has been just a wonderful envelope or how bilingual story time, I guess, has kind of been a wonderful envelope for outreach, however you want to look at that. So just examples of things that either, that I had the opportunity to be part of when I was working as a frontlines librarian, or, some of the awesome things that I've learned or that are being done by my colleagues in other parts of the country. So that's where we're going to go today. So let's dive in. I really like to position outreach, as it's a paradigm shift. What I'm asking for is, or advocating for, is a paradigm shift. We in libraries are set up to be easy to be served by the folks that we're already serving, right? You can think of that as our traditional customer. And very often, this is a largely white, largely middle class community. Not always, but that just, if you look at libraries as a whole and just sort of what like the traditional library structure is, that's who we're set up for, to have the most ease of access. And the paradigm shift, a lot of times, if anyone falls outside of that realm of, the traditional customer and needs more from us in order to have the same access as our traditional customer, it's seen as extra, right? It's oh, but we don't have time for that. We've got to do this and da da da. So it's like, it's always sort of this extra thing. And what I'm asking us to do is to consider that outreach is a necessary component to ensuring equitable access to many different groups, including immigrant groups and groups that speak languages other than English. So that's what we're going to really be spending our first chunk of time on today. So here is a familiar scene. Like I said, I've been doing consulting work with libraries all across the country, big, small, everything in between, for the last 8 years, and I see this scenario play out over and over and over and over again. So if this feels familiar to you, you're not alone, okay? A lot of times libraries will realize that they have a portion of their community that is dramatically underserved, and when I say libraries, I should be more specific. It's usually frontlines library staff, right? And it's usually folks in circulation or children's services who are really the ones who are the first to start to champion these causes within their public libraries. So they realize, we have got, and a Somali community here that is rapidly growing, and we really aren't serving that community, or they're not coming to the library. What can we do? How can we get people to come to the library so that they can have access to all of the free, awesome stuff that we have to offer? I know. Let's do story time, either bilingual or in, whatever is the language spoke among the target audience. And so they work and work and work. They get the books, they find the songs, they connect with volunteers if they, don't have the language skills themselves. And they launch their story time and they're so excited, and no one comes, or very few people come. Or the people who do come aren't from the community that they're really trying to reach. They're the same storytime folks that come to everything. And so that can be really, really discouraging. And in libraries where, numbers are super important for justifying what you're doing. You know, sometimes those efforts can even get shut down. So what happened? What happened is that we're missing a piece of the puzzle. Um, you know, it's a very natural tendency to look to what we know we do well, like story time, and think about how can I adapt this for another community? How can I adapt this to be in another language? But bilingual story time is not an if you build it, they will come uh, kind of a situation. If the library is not on people's radar, um, just suddenly having a bilingual story time is not going to like magically put it on their radar as a place to visit. And that missing puzzle piece really is outreach, um, relationship building, um, and building trust within the community that we're trying to target, to put the library on the radar of those families that we want to reach. And bilingual storytime, or storytime in general, can be a wonderful part of that process, but it is not likely going to find much success at bringing your target audience into the library if they are not already there as a first step. So the outreach process offers us so many benefits. Not only does it help us to spread the word about the library and what the library has to offer, it helps us learn about the community that we're trying to serve, because there's a lot of things that we need to know that without those personal connections, or without those community partnerships, how could we know them? You know, if it's not part of our life experience and we don't have relationships within that community, how are we going to know how people in that community exchange local information? How are we going to know where they feel comfortable and safe? How are we going to know what agencies exist to meet their various information needs, and where there are gaps in their information needs? So it's incredibly useful, not just as a marketing tool when we do outreach, but also in learning about the community and in building relationships and gaining the trust of the community that we're trying to serve as well. So I'm going to play a brief snippet here of a video from Pat Mora, whose name I would imagine is probably pretty familiar to a lot of you. She's a prolific children's author, and also the founder of El Día de los Niños, Dia de los Libros. So El Día de los Niños, Children's Day, is a holiday that is celebrated in many Latin American countries. And Pat Mora had the idea to take this recognizable family holiday and connect it with books and reading. And so she worked with national library organizations more than 20 years ago to start this initiative, and there are DIA programs that happen all over the country now. So we'll just hear Pat Mora in her own words.
We really need to differentiate between the fact that we have all kinds of Latino families. If we're going to focus just for a minute on Latino families, I'm equally interested in Vietnamese families and Hmong families and how we make all kinds of families feel welcome. But to focus for a minute on Latino families, there's a wide range of diversity within that group. Not only diversity in terms of home country, so it could be Cuba, it could be Puerto Rico, it could be Venezuela, but not all Latino families are immigrant families. So there are families that have been here for 5 generations. And when we think about outreach programs, we need to sort of really study, just the way we do in anything, what is the population that I'm working with like? If we're talking about immigrant populations, there may be the notion that maybe I have to pay if I go to the library, so I don't go. Maybe I don't speak English and I'm afraid that the librarian's going to ask me a question and I'm going to look like incompetent in front of my children, you know? I asked a teacher who worked with a group of students in Nevada one day when the librarian said, well, I'm just really discouraged. I have a bilingual story hour and nobody's coming. And so I said to this young teacher, why aren't they coming? And she said, what I hoped she would say, they're afraid. They're afraid. You know, we don't like to put ourselves in situations where we feel we might be humiliated. And so there's very goodwill on the inside of that library or that school. How do we extend that? You know, and it's the same issue, frankly, that museums are working with now. How do we reach out to populations that perhaps previous generations were ambivalent about? And what excites me now is the number of teachers and librarians that are excited, that really want to serve the whole population. So how do we do that? Well, we set a tone, I think. Sometimes it means we have to leave the library. So I have a lot of librarian friends who do all kinds of outreach at community centers. They go to churches, they go to social service agencies, they go to medical clinics and start talking about books and start saying, come over to the library. I'm going to be there when you get there.
So I just want to highlight a couple of things that we heard Pat Mora say there before we move on from this slide. The first being her acknowledgement of the diversity within, as she was commenting, specifically the Latino community, but we can apply that much more broadly to, you know, immigrant communities in general. There is no one immigrant experience, right? There is no one Latino experience. You know, whatever the community is that you are trying to reach, there is every bit as much diversity within that community as within your broader community as a whole. And so that's really important to remember. You know, sometimes we have to be sort of reduced to talking in generalizations. I guess especially in a training context or something like that. But those generalizations they are not going to paint a full picture, and every community is going to be unique. And so keeping that diversity in mind is really, really important, you know, even for folks who are within, you know, let's say first generation Spanish speaking immigrants. There are so many differences that can, you know, exist within those groups. I mean, there are differences in traditions, differences in how various aspects of the language are used, differences within cultural celebrations and holidays and all kinds of things like that. I'll give you an example from when I worked at the last library that I worked at. We had a staff of maybe about 12 folks, something like that, fluctuate a little bit. And 2 of those folks were from Peru. And one was a refugee from Peru. Her family fled political violence under the Fujimori administration. And then another one of the staff members, his family was very well connected within that administration. So, you know, that was definitely interesting to, to see the tensions that would sometimes play out there. But I just bring that out as a way to again illustrate that even if communities seem like they're all checking the same boxes, and what however you define those boxes, there that humanity and that diversity is really important not to lose sight of. I also just want to highlight that, Pat Mora talked about fear and about discomfort, and we'll talk more about that in the context of how that affects the communities that we're trying to serve themselves. But I also just want to acknowledge that that kind of discomfort, it can exist within us too. When we're taking on this work, especially if we don't often find ourselves um, in a position where we are the racial or cultural or linguistic minority. Um, it's a really, really wonderful exercise um, to intentionally put yourself in places in your community where you are the minority, if in some way that is not a part of your daily life. So even if um, the racial minority experience is part of your daily life, being in putting yourself in a situation where you're in the minority because of language. It's just really can be a great way to stretch us to look at things from another perspective. But I just want to acknowledge that feeling nervous um, about serving a community with which you are not personally familiar, that doesn't mean that there's anything bad or wrong with you. Okay, so and it also doesn't mean that you can't overcome that as well. And I'll talk a little bit more about my own story with that journey later on. But um, I think it's important to name it because those nerves are usually coming from a really good place and maybe just a smidge of hyper perfectionism where we really worry about um, what if I do something wrong, what if I say something wrong, or just not having the personal experience of being in the minority and then suddenly finding ourselves there. So I want to share our first case study. This is from my experience working at a really, really big library system in Ohio in the mid 2000s. And that library that I worked for, um, I was the sole Spanish language outreach coordinator for the entire system. So I didn't really work in one location. I was really traveling around the city um, and especially targeting various neighborhoods that had large Latino and Spanish speaking immigrant communities. But this library that I worked for, their big strategic initiative, their thing that they were all in on was early literacy. And in fact, that's even how my position got created. It wasn't because it was a strategic priority to do outreach to immigrant communities or do outreach to communities that speak other languages. It was that looking at the numbers, if we want to move the needle on early literacy in this city, then we have to be working with Spanish speaking families. So we need somebody who can do that in, different parts of the city. But at any rate, uh, there was a wonderful grant that we got that allowed us to create these super awesome kits for families that had books and songs and props. And what we would do would be put on early literacy parent workshops based on every child ready to read. And then every family that came got one of those kits. And we were in partnership with the United Way, who also provided meals for all of the families. And I, I was put in charge of the Spanish language version of that, of those workshops. And so I knew, just based on what I was already seeing and learning, and in the work that I had been doing, okay, yeah, I could do the work to set up a Spanish language early literacy workshop at the meeting room of the library, like folks are doing in some other locations. But who's going to come? You know, and what I really need to be doing is looking for other agencies with similar missions that have the space where I could bring this to them, and bring this to the families that they serve. So I met up with built a partnership with this agency called La Esperanza Latina, the Center for Latin Hope, and man, they did everything. They really, honestly, basically, like, whatever the Spanish speaking community came to them and said, we need help with, they would figure out a way to help with whatever that need was. So we're talking super shoestring staff, but they had childcare, they had English classes, they had fitness classes, they had computer classes. I mean, and not to mention the kind of one-on-one assistance that they were providing to families, constantly, all day, every day. So they were very, very much embedded in the community that I was trying to reach. They had a lot of relationships. And when I spoke with the director about these early literacy workshops and what we had to offer, she was all about it. They had a great space that we were able to use. And so, basically what the library did, we obviously had the materials to distribute through the grant, and we provided the parent training, and we gave the agency just like a stack of flyers in Spanish promoting the event. But in terms of the actual marketing and promoting of the event, that was all them. That was all them. And it wasn't, here we've got flyers on our bulletin board. It was individual staff who were talking with the families that they serve about, what was going to be happening next week here at the center, and those families talking to their neighbors who had young kids, and blah, 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 blah. That was really grassroots, like word of mouth. And we did 2 sessions, limited to 30 families, just because in terms of space, that's all that we could fit in there. And they filled them both up. They filled them both up. And nothing like that would have been possible from me. No way. Even with the work that I had already been out there doing and the relationships that I had already been building, like, there was no way that was going to happen without that partnership, and without hosting it, at this agency where people already felt comfortable. They knew the lay of the land there. They would chat with these folks in their neighborhood all the time. It was huge. So those in and of themselves, like, were wonderful. But what was so cool was where it went from there. So, and these were things that they all happened so organically, and there wasn't any way to sort of predict that at the outset. So when we did these 2 workshops, there was a journalist who came, who was from one of the local Spanish language newspapers, which was in that community, and I have found continues to be in a lot of communities, a really vital piece of media for how people learn about what is happening within their local community. So she did a story on the early literacy workshops. And so the library was named, right? So in this media that's being consumed by lots and lots of folks who speak Spanish all over the city, there's the library making its first impression, and being one that really shows like there are things happening and they're free, and this is uh, a huge support for your child's education, and there's stuff in Spanish. And so how wonderful that that happened. And then I followed up with that journalist when I saw the article, and we wound up building a partnership where then uh, uh, myself and a couple of colleagues were writing monthly guest articles for that paper. Just, here's what's up at the library, and maybe it'd be some stuff about early literacy or great new books in Spanish or homework help or whatever. But it kept that friendly, welcoming presence in the Spanish language media even after that event was over. We also made the effort to make the connection between that organization and their local branch, because like I said, I was working all over the very large city, rather than being in one local branch. But there was a branch very close by that did have one full-time Spanish-speaking staff member in adult services, and I think a part-time person in youth services. And so, just me and the director sort of touching base after the workshops were over, and like, wow, that was so great. What feedback are you getting? Blah, blah, blah. And we decided to organize a library tour to help to connect families with their local branch. So some families had their own transportation and came to the library. Some met at the center and they provided transportation, and everyone came in as a group, and it was super festive. We had things decorated and balloons and welcome signs and little plates of snacks, so it was just super welcoming for folks from the time they walked through the door. And it was, hey, we're so glad you're here. Let us introduce you to your library. And just walk around and show people not only what things are available and where they are, but also how to use some of the things that could be a little bit cumbersome, especially if you're facing a language barrier. So for example, how to sign onto the public computers, and how to how to use the self-checkout and things like that. So, so that was really, really great. And we also made sure to make face-to-face introductions. Here's Andrew. Andrew se habla español también, y él está aquí a ayudarles. He's here to help you guys. He speaks Spanish too. And here's Josephine and Eric, and they don't speak Spanish, but they are so sweet. And I promise, like, even if their Spanish is real bad, like, they're really going to be super friendly and are going to do their best to help you, And so just making those really welcoming, friendly, personal connections as being part of the tour as well. And then I sort of handed it over to the local branch to continue that relationship. And it was so cool to hear later that the adult services person who spoke Spanish wound up he had been trying to do Spanish language computer classes at that library for quite some time, and it just wasn't taking off. But when he found out that this was something that the center was doing, but they were also trying to do 10,000 other things too, he was like, hey, if you guys are interested, this is something that I've been trying to do at the library, and it just hasn't been going great, but I'd love to do it for you all at the center. And they were like, yes, awesome. Someone else can come in and teach these Spanish language computer classes so we can tend to the million other things that we have to do. So what a value add, right? Not only was the library really tangibly supporting the work of this organization, but then it continued to allow there to be a personal library presence within the community and outside of the library doors on a regular basis. And all of that, the newspaper, the tour, the ongoing relationship, I didn't have any anticipation that that would happen when I first approached the director of this organization about doing the early literacy workshops. I just knew that it there was no way that I was going to be able to reach the families I was trying to reach if I didn't work in conjunction with community partners. And then it's just this beautiful example of how these relationships, when they align, can just blossom in ways that you never would have expected. So let's talk about barriers to access. What are the things that make it hard for communities that access libraries or have access needs that are different than those of our traditional users? What are the things that keep them from being able to enjoy the same full access that other people in our community do? I'm going to talk about this in as external barriers and internal barriers. So external barriers being things faced by the community that we are trying to reach, and internal barriers being things within our organization, our staff, our structure that make it difficult for people to use us. So the first is one that, probably judging on what I saw in the survey responses, a lot of you anticipate or just sort of like kind of feel in your gut. And that's lack of familiarity with public library programs and services. And it isn't just a feeling. I mean, this is certainly very real. Not all parts of the world have public libraries, with books that aren't solely on academic topics, have public libraries that allow you to take materials home, or have public libraries that offer, the wide array of kinds of programs across the lifespan that are very commonplace and typical in libraries here. So we can't assume that the library means anything. We can't assume that the library means anything to the community that we are trying to reach. And there's a I'm going to share from some research, actually, because this isn't just anecdotal and it isn't just like a feeling. There are a couple of papers that really comment on this specifically. So in 2018, all of these articles are linked. All of these articles are linked on your handouts page, so you don't have to worry if you didn't catch a title or whatever. Like it's all going to be there for you. But in 2018, American Libraries Association published a white paper called Library Programs and New Americans, and this paragraph just really stood out to me. So here it is. Sometimes library services remain underutilized simply due to a lack of awareness about what is being offered, perceptions of who a service is intended for, or other concerns. Libraries often struggle to reach their target audiences. This is true in general, but even more so when target audiences include those who face linguistic or cultural barriers. A constant refrain heard by programming librarians is, "Oh, I never knew the library did that." And I mean, any of us who work in libraries, like, we know that there's a perception issue anyway, right? How many of your friends have told you, like, "Oh, I would love to work in a library and just read books all day," and you just want to be like, "Psh, psh," like, when was the last time you've even been inside of a public library? My goodness, you know? Like, so we know that, um, that just in general, you know, people don't always know what the public library in 2020 is all about, right? But we also just have to keep it, you know, just strip ourselves of our own assumptions of what people know. Um, you know, because it just may not be understood that the public library is free and I can check books out and there are programs for children and it's separate from school and it's separate from childcare and I don't have to show any specific ID to even walk into the building. I mean, all of these kinds of things we just can't assume that people automatically know. Um, Another little snippet that I want to read, this is just the first paragraph from the overview of a 2013 report by the Pew Research Center called Public Libraries and Hispanics. And they say, so this is narrowing down even more specifically to Latinx and Spanish-speaking immigrant communities. Um, when it comes to public libraries, immigrant Hispanics pose both a challenge and an opportunity to the library community. On the one hand, this group, which makes up half of the adult U.S. Hispanic population, is less likely than other Americans to have ever visited a U.S. public library and is much less likely to say that they see it as very easy to do so. So you can see there's this familiarity gap, this perception gap, right? But they go on. At the same time, Hispanic immigrants who have made their way to a public library stand out as the most appreciative of what libraries have to offer, from free books to resources to the fact that libraries tend to offer safe spaces. So, you know, just how wonderful of a data point. And look, the status quo is what it is, right? And outreach work requires us doing things differently than how we have always done them in order to ensure equitable access as opposed to simply equal access. And so you may find at times that you have to advocate up the chain of command to be able to do the work that you know needs to be done because, you know, change is hard. But what a wonderful piece of information to just kind of have in your toolkit to bring out at the perfect time, because, you know, this really shows, like, yeah, okay, short term, there's going to be a, you know, work that is different from weeding and work that is different from doing 7 in-house programs a week and work that is different from sitting on the children's desk. It's going to be different work, yes. However, you know, the research shows that if we can get these folks connected with library services, they love us and appreciate us more than any other group in our community. So what a huge, you know, missing opportunity that is just sitting right there, you know, and not only is it going to value the community that we are trying to reach, which is, of course, what our motivations often are in doing this work, is to bring that value to all members of our community. But it's also going to value the library as an organization, which is often the language that we have to speak strategically if we find ourselves having to do that kind of internal advocacy. So just a little piece of strategy to kind of tuck away. You can hear my cat meowing out the door. Hello, Homer. Working from home, friends. It is what it is. All right. Another external barrier is a lack of personal relationships with staff. And this I think is really, really key to understanding how access is different for immigrant communities than for our traditional customers. And so I'm going to speak specifically about what I have observed in working with Latino and Spanish-speaking communities, and if people have seen things that are similar or different in other communities that they serve, you know, all of that commentary will be welcome. But what we really have to kind of reframe how trust is understood by our traditional users to understand how important trust is to be able to reach our immigrant community. So let me just explain this with an example. Say I'm working at the reference desk or whatever, and a family comes in and it's a week before school starts, and you know they've got to find something on the shelves today to take home that's on their child's summer reading list, right? We've all been there. So for our traditional customers, if I'm like the person that they see the most and connect with the most and like kind of have a relationship with, yeah, they're probably going to look around and see if I'm there, right? But if I'm not, they're not going to leave without what they came there for, right? They're going to ask somebody else for help. And that's because the trust lies between that user and the institution of the public library, right? So, you know, I trust that, you know, public libraries provide access to information and are going to, you know, treat me fairly and help me answer my question and get me what I need. So thereby, I trust the individual staff members who are representatives of or agents of that institution. I don't need to have ever seen that person before. I don't need to know their name. We don't have to have like some conversation about what our families were up to over the weekend. You know, I inherently trust the person who works for the library because I trust the library. With what I have seen with serving Hispanic and Latino immigrant communities, like especially if you're talking about first generation, it's the complete and total opposite. There is no pre-existing trust in the library as an institution. And in fact, there could be things that are working against having the trust in any institution whatsoever. But even with that off the table, there isn't the trust in the institution. There's the trust in me as the individual person. So I know, whatever, library, okay, cool. I know Katie, and I need to ask Katie a question about summer reading. And I'm going to ask Katie that question if I see her at the laundromat or the grocery store or the library or on the bus or wherever. Like Katie is the person who helps me with information, not the library. And so it is entirely possible, you know, that if those families, you know, come through the door and they don't see the face of the person that they have that trusting relationship with, that they might just turn around and leave, because that is a incredibly vulnerable feeling to just go up and ask someone else for help. So this really elucidates a part of the work of the folks who do build those personal relationships, is that not only do you have to build those personal relationships, but then work to transfer that personal trust to the institution, so that people know that the library is something that they have access to, and that the information that they're gaining through me isn't coming, you know, from me, but is, you know, is coming from the library. So that is a really good thing for, especially for supervisory folks, to keep in mind. Because there is a lot of emotional labor that is unseen, that um, falls on the shoulders of your folks who are doing this kind of outreach work, especially if they are insiders to that community. And so, you know, it's just really important to be aware of that, um, and make sure that um, we aren't creating unintentional inequality uh, by treating groups with different needs as though they all had the same need, to call back to that Kimberly Crenshaw quote. Another external barrier is fear, you know, and so we heard this commented on in the Pat Mora video. And that video is probably, I mean, it's been around for a while. And that fear, as I'm sure a lot of you would just imagine, has really intensified in recent years. You know, there's a lot more explicit, derogatory, anti-immigrant sentiment in public discourse. Um, and you know, the fear is real, and for people too, because you know, there are risks that can have huge impacts on people's families or on their personal security. And so, you know, now, you know, even before COVID, now wouldn't be the time to go knocking, you know, door to door, and you know, in an immigrant neighborhood, you know, and being like, hey, let me tell you about the library, you know, necessarily, but rather to be working in partnership with other agencies and other individuals who already have the trust of that community, if the library hasn't already established it. And so I'm again going to read from some research here. So this is an article published in 2017 in the Library Quarterly, and the title is Information Sources of Latin American Immigrants in the Rural Midwest in the Trump Era. And, you know, this isn't a political thing. You know, this isn't right, wrong, left, right, blah, whatever. But there are realities. You know, our political landscape creates realities in people's lives that then affect how we are able to provide service. And so we need to be aware of those realities, regardless of wherever our politics may be. So in this research study, the authors were talking to Latin American immigrants just about how they exchanged information about their local community. And workplaces were huge, Spanish language media was huge, churches were huge, even university extension programs were really big, but not so much for libraries. So they say, despite the passionate response from some of our public libraries. The fact is that immigrants in the rural Midwest, authorized or not, and even though this was the rural Midwest, I would imagine that people can identify with this in other parts of the country as well. So immigrants in the rural Midwest did not use libraries as a source of information. It seems unlikely that public libraries in these communities would be viewed as information providers for immigrants. Libraries in the rural Midwest might be better served to partner with other agencies to hold information seminars at non-threatening sites and to serve as a liaison between social service agencies and those who seek information. So, if those relationships don't already exist between the library and the community that you're trying to serve, the best way to approach building that trust is going to be by working with trusted community partners rather than trying to seek out individual families necessarily. There's also barriers of what we do, right, or what we're not doing. I ask people, all the time, I hear this, I did bilingual story time and no one came. Okay, talk to me about how you're marketing it. Well, we put it in our newsletter and we put it on our Facebook page and we have flyers in Spanish that we put up in the library, and so we're really pretty good in libraries at marketing to the people who already know us and love us, but not always so great at figuring out how to, get that information out to the people who we're not serving. So that's something that we have to think about and look for those opportunities. Perceived unfriendliness of staff. So here, once again, I'm going to turn to the research. What year did this one come out? 2008. So this was the first big study on how Latinos use libraries in the United States. It was put out by Web Junction and the Tomas Rivera Policy Institute. It's called Latinos and Public Library Perceptions. And I'll just read you a little bit from this. Latinos are more concerned with friendly staff service than Spanish language access. This suggests that although the library is a place where Latinos expect to feel comfortable around the staff, access to the Spanish language is not pivotal in influencing library visits. So basically what they found in their study, talking to Latino folks across all different kinds of demographics all over the country, was that the number one predictor of continued library use was whether or not the staff was perceived as friendly, even if they didn't speak Spanish, even if they didn't have Spanish language materials or programs at that building. So, this is huge to know, because just like in the same way the Pew Research report showed, what an incredible opportunity we have in terms of how much if we can make these connections within the Hispanic community, how these folks, can wind up serving as like ambassadors for the library within their community. That kind of word of mouth, it goes the other way too. And so you can do all of this great work going out to different agencies and building partnerships and blah, 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 blah. And then if people come through the door, like, okay, here we go. And they're treated with disrespect, or they're ignored, or assumptions are made about whether or not they speak English or whatever, and they're treated in a way that's unfriendly, that can undo all of the work that you have been embarking on. And that will also spread throughout the community via word of mouth as well. So it's really, really important to have very clear expectations around customer service, explicitly acknowledging customer service for people who don't speak English, and for people who may be from immigrant communities, and then not just having those standards and those policies, but holding people accountable to them as well. And so that's an internal cultural piece, right? And then finally, another internal barrier is what we might think that we know what people really need from the library and be so off. You know? So yeah, we just might have inaccurate assumptions about what people really want or need from their library. So I'll give you a little example here from a colleague of mine, Adriana Silva. She works in Northern Kentucky. She is originally from Mexico. She speaks Spanish, rural community, but large Latino immigrant community. And when she started working at that library, they were adamant, we got to have a bilingual story time. So she tries it. And even though she's doing outreach, people just aren't coming. And so finally, she just asks, she just, had enough rapport built with this group of Latina moms specifically at a community agency that she was doing regular outreach with. And she's like, why are you guys coming to bilingual story time? And they're like, we don't want bilingual story time. We want Spanish story time. I mean, look where we are. Our kids are already speaking English. We already are, starting to have that difficulty of kids not wanting to speak Spanish with us at home. We'll ask them a question in Spanish and they'll answer back in English, or or whatever. What we want is something where our community can come together and really feel comfortable and totally interact in Spanish. And so that's what she took back to her library and convinced them to give that a try, even though, that wasn't what the library thought the community needed or wanted. And then, of course, when that change was made, then there was a lot of change in participation as well. So here, we're about to do a little bit of an exercise together. We've been talking about the rationale, the need for outreach, and the relationship between outreach and access, because some communities have very easy access to the library as it is currently set up, as it is currently staffed, as it currently operates, as it has historically operated. That access is built in for the traditional customer. But just because folks who fall outside of that umbrella of the traditional customer have different needs in order to enjoy the same kind of access as the rest of the community, that doesn't mean that it's extra, right? I think that that really falls on us, that's part of our responsibility. So I'm just going to bring us back to that Kimberly Crenshaw quote, and just another opportunity to reflect on it and see if it lands any differently now than at the beginning. That treating different things the same can generate as much an inequality as treating the same things differently. So sometimes what happens is the assumptions that we have about why a group is hard to reach, why folks aren't coming to the library, why they're not coming to this program, whatever. Some of those assumptions and this isn't done on purpose, but it reveals it reveals something that's worth unpacking. They place the responsibility for access on the shoulders of the underserved community, as opposed to taking ownership of the responsibility for access within the library. So we're going to take some assumptions and just kind of reframe them, so that responsibility can shift from the community to the library. So I'm going to walk you through the first one to kind of explain what I mean. So this is one of those things that we have all heard a million times, right? And it may not be about, serving an immigrant community, but it comes up every time we try to change anything, right? Well, we tried that once, but it didn't work, so we stopped doing it, right? So in the context of serving folks who speak languages other than English, we tried to serve fill in the blank community before, but we just didn't have success. They just don't use libraries. That's the takeaway. So I would ask questions about that statement. Like, well, what have we learned? If we go back and look at the past, where can we see mistakes, missed opportunities? Where can we see seeds of success that maybe just weren't prioritized or built on or nurtured quite enough? And so then I might rephrase that to say that ensuring equitable access to information for everyone in our community is a value that we demonstrate through our continual work and our continual willingness to adapt to changing community needs. So yeah, we tried that in the past and it didn't work, but we know that that we just got to keep learning and keep adapting to make sure that we're maintaining the value of access in the way that we serve our community. So what I would like to do, I've got two more phrases, and these actually come from language that you all shared in the survey that I sent out. So please do not feel attacked if you see your words on the next two slides, okay? Your words were selected because you used really succinct and like kind of wonderful language to express ideas that were conveyed by multiple people. There's nothing wrong with you as a group. There's nothing wrong with you individually. If you see your words, this is not an attack. This is an exercise, right? This is an exercise. We're coming at things from a really different perspective today, and we're doing it together, and we're doing it with purpose. So no one is being, called out in any way in this. What I would like for us to do is use the chat function. And you can either rewrite the sentiment that you see as a statement that shifts that responsibility from the community to the library, or you can suggest some questions to think about that might be helpful in making that shift of responsibility. But we're just going to try to reframe some of these next two assumptions, and you can choose to send your statements, questions, ideas to the entire group, or if you prefer, and neither one is better than the other, I don't care, you can send them to me, and I can just to me individually, and I can read them out without anyone's name attached to them. So either way is totally fine. And yeah, this is just an activity of reframing some assumptions. And part of the point of this is, again, getting back to the fact that you may find yourself having to make the case to people who are higher up, have more authority, have more decision-making responsibility all of that than you do in your organization. And so knowing what kinds of assumptions might exist in an organization and already thinking through some of the ways to shift that language, that's only going to help you when the time comes should you find yourself needing to make that case. So this is a strategy piece as well. So here we go. First one. Libraries, to some, feel like an extension of government. So send them to the group, send them to me in the chat. What are some questions or some other ways of phrasing that statement that place less of the burden of access on the community and take more of that responsibility within the library? And I'll just hold the space quietly till I start to see some participation coming in. So an idea around how to make government serve the people and not be a burden or a fear to them. I'm with you there for sure. So the library can't fix all of government, right? So we're thinking in a good direction, but keep it going on the library responsibility and shifting that away from the community itself. What kinds of interactions have people had with other government institutions in our community? How can we partner with other government institutions to reduce barriers to access? It would be nice to recognize that we aren't neutral. Yeah, who we serve and who we don't serve, and what we take a stand on and how we take a stand and all of that. I definitely see that. Was this feeling from people's previous experiences? How can we change it? How are we reframing the library's image in a way that changes that narrative for the community? Library buildings sometimes look like these palaces of learning, which can be intimidating just to look at, let alone enter. What a great point. So, going out into the community, personalizing the library, great phrase, personalizing the library. Yes, yes. So you guys are thinking that what you just did, yes, that's what we're going to do on the next one too. This is exactly the kind of thinking that I'm looking for. I'm loving it. Are we posing barriers like the government? So ID to get a library card and waiting in line, the DMV connection, like that whole thing of like waiting in line and then realizing you don't have the one document that you needed, all of this great stuff. So yeah, you guys are doing awesome. So yeah, some of the ways that just the kinds of questions that I would throw out is right in line with what you guys are saying. How can we differentiate ourselves from other institutions? How do we help people to feel safe and welcome using library resources and visiting library space, knowing that those aren't always one and the same? And what trusted community partners can help to communicate this message to our target audience? So if we aren't able to communicate that message, who is trusted by that community that we can work with to help communicate that message on on our behalf. So yeah, you guys are definitely thinking in the same kind of way that I was thinking. So this is another one that came from the survey. So let's reframe this one as well. And remember, you know, like as we reframe all of these things to fully believe in the passion and dedication of whoever the previous words came from, these words are coming from, you know, that person is totally dedicated, you know, and we're all working together to learn new skills on how to approach things differently. So tight-knit communities do not always step outside their comfort zone or seek additional services outside the people they feel comfortable connecting with. So what's a way that we can reframe this assumption where the library has more responsibility for access than the community itself? Libraries have to work harder to do outreach to some communities. It's getting closer. Can we go to where they feel comfortable? We've got some strategy things here around, you know, building connections, gaining trust. I love this one. Find their comfort zones. Find that. I think that's the perfect place to segue to some of the questions that I had, because one of the first questions that I had is, well, how does the library step outside of its comfort zone? You know, we're expecting we're expecting, you know, members of the immigrant community or the people who face linguistic barriers to step outside of their comfort zone, but how does the library step outside of their comfort zone? And why is there no library presence within those tight-knit immigrant communities? Is this a staffing issue? You know, is it a silo issue in terms of how we operate within the broader community? And is the library perceived as unsafe or unwelcoming within some communities? And how would you know? How would you know the honest answer to that? You know, without relationships within these communities, how would we even know the answer to that? So kudos to you guys. Thank you so much for for jumping in and participating and thinking through how to reframe these things. There's a lot more great stuff that's still coming in that I didn't necessarily get a chance to read, but I can see that you're really thinking along along lines that prioritize access. So I love it. We're going to take a teeny tiny little break here because it's been a lot of information. It's been a lot of information, right? I don't want this part to be the part where it's like, okay, all my questions, here we go, any questions, boom, 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 boom. But if there's any, because we still have a lot more to cover, you know, we've got a touch over an hour still to go. But if there's anything specifically in around the rationale and the need for outreach and why outreach is integral to access and how we have to sort of reshape our paradigm around, you know, what work is is extra, and who that serves and who it doesn't serve, and all of those kinds of things. If there are questions or concerns that really feel like they need addressed while we pause here, you can put those in the box to everyone, or you can send them independently to me, and I'll take a couple of minutes to to respond to those things. While we take this little, I'm calling this like a little processing break, like just a little bit of a breathing space, even if you don't have questions or concerns, this can be a chance just to sort of let some of what you heard sink in and think about how it applies to your specific library. Write down any notes. Going on from here, I'm going to share like my 3 suggested steps of how you get this going. And while we take this little processing break, I'm going to share with you a really fun book trailer, and also this just really awesome quote that I think sums up, like just really creatively states so much of what I'm just coming to understand about the need for this paradigm shift. And so this is from a user on Twitter that I follow, Adebola Fabiku, and if I said your name wrong, very sorry. But the quote is so great. Library inclusion seems to be about me, the person of color, being allowed to have a seat at your table. Maybe I don't want to sit at your table. You should sit at my table. It's way cooler over here, right? Like just that is a paradigm shift too. It's great. So here is this really fun book trailer for Nino Wrestles the Worlds. And after this, I'll reply if there are any questions or concerns that come in. So regardless of whether you are going to do bilingual story time, regardless of whether you're trying to improve service to Latino communities or any other community, or just want to increase inclusion in your ongoing, already existing story times, if you don't already know it, Nino Wrestles the World is definitely one of those awesome titles to have in every collection and be sure to use in programming. It's definitely one that we have a lot of fun with here at my house. My daughter's a little bit obsessed, so. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and keep on going. Hope it was useful to have a little bit of a processing break. I'm going to close out the chat that I had up here as well. Sorry, y'all, my screen is, there we go. So I'm going to give you 3 steps to using outreach to help you set your bilingual story time up for success. The first is the community leader interview. And here's the thing to know. In any immigrant community within, a broader town, city, or, whatever, there are people who crop up who are either within that community, from within that community, or have really close contact with that community, who understand the differences the challenges between where people are coming from and where they are arriving. And these folks become these gatekeepers or these community leaders, these people who folks know, like, if you have questions about whatever, how do I enroll my child in school? What do I do if I want to buy a car? Is it safe to call the police if there's been a break-in? Whatever. Like, these are the people that folks ask those questions of as they're getting their footing in their new community. And these community leaders are vital. Like, they are so important to connect with and helpful to connect with. And so from 2004 to 2006, Web Junction did a series of workshops all over the country around Spanish language outreach in libraries. And they worked with a consultant named Yolanda Cuesta, who I mean, I learned this from her for sure, like so much of this comes on the shoulders of previous generations of people like Yolanda and Oralia Garza de Cortez and Lucia Gonzalez and, other people who have been doing this work. My previous boss, Betty Abmishani, who was definitely one of these gatekeepers in the Lexington community. But so she developed this community leader interview guide template, and it continues to be one of the most useful resources that I'm always pointing people to. It's linked in your handout. There's kind of how-to information. There's suggested questions. So I'm just going to highlight some key things from this. But this is about finding those individuals, those trusted individuals within the community. And those folks may not have what we think of as official leadership titles. Maybe it's not the director of the Ohio Hispanic Coalition, but it's the, part-time, youth services homework coordinator at the Ohio Hispanic Coalition, who actually has ongoing direct contact with the families that I'm looking to serve, and who is very much a part of their daily lives and who's really trusted, that is going to be the person that I'm really going to want to connect with. And I'm not going to lie to you, all right? I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It can be, if you're an outsider to this community, right, and you don't already have personal relationships, or your library doesn't already have professional relationships within this community, it can be challenging to figure out who those people are, but they exist. They absolutely exist. And they're just gonna be incredible allies for you once you connect with them. And then you in turn can help the library actually be relevant and useful to their community as well. So, every community is going to be different. And so, in one community, for example, maybe the elementary ESL teacher is that person. And in another community, maybe it's a Spanish-speaking pastor for a local church. Or maybe in another community, it's the person at the bank that speaks Spanish. I mean, it's just going to vary by community, and it is a little bit of a process, but things can start to build pretty quickly once you do start to identify these folks. So key things about the interview itself. First, don't be overly reliant on email. I know it's different right now because of the pandemic, but email is easy to dismiss, especially when you're talking about folks who may be in really high demand, and so you might be served better with a more personal touch. Like actually, if you know that that person's at the bank that you want to talk to, going to the bank and just saying, I understand we don't have time to do a full interview now, but I wanted to let you know who I am, and I'm from the library, and I really and would just we want to learn more about our local Latino community or our local Hmong community or local Vietnamese community or whatever. So that we can better serve them. And, I know that you are someone that works with this community regularly, and I would love to just set up a time to pick your brain, and to ask you some questions. So sometimes being more personal than only using email, going to them for the interview so that you can actually see their space and get a sense of what their interactions look like on a daily basis, as opposed to having them come to the library, especially for your first connection. And don't frame this conversation as what do people want from the library? Like, what should we do? That, don't set it up that way. You're the library expert, not them, right? They're the community expert, not you. So you're going to want to ask them about their work with the community, what they see as being unmet information needs within the community, or challenges that people face when they first arrive here, or whatever. Like you're going to ask them about their work and learn about the community through their perspective, and then you're going to start to see, because you're the library expert, where there's opportunity to expand or build on some of what you're hearing. Um, if there are concrete things that the library already has going on that you can offer that can help support their work. So thinking back to my example about the early literacy workshops and the Center for Latin Hope, and when the local staff person went there to do the Spanish language computer classes as opposed to doing them in the library, that was a super concrete way to support their work that had value add for both parties, right, as well as for the community, of course. So yeah, definitely offer those things when you see them. And always, 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 especially at the beginning, ask at the end of your conversation, you know, this has been such a great conversation. It's been so helpful for me to learn about the community through your perspective. I'm wondering if there are one or two other people or organizations that who are also working with this community that you also think it would be wise for me to reach out to and to connect with. And that is how you start to build your network. And so, yeah, maybe the first interview is a dud, right? Maybe you don't get a whole lot of useful information. But if you keep going and asking that for those, for those names and then following up, it won't be long before you find the people who you can tell are going to be really excellent to learn from and work with. And then as you're building your network, don't forget to feed your network, right? So we're always following up, right? So going back later and letting folks know, hey, that conversation that we had was so great. And there is this idea that you had of doing X, Y, or Z. I wanted to tell you that we have started trying that out a little bit, and here's how it's going. Or I remember last time we talked, one of the things that was a big challenge in the community was, X, Y, or Z. And I was just curious from your perspective, if that's still ongoing or how things have changed or whatever it is, but just circling back to let people know I'm still around, I'm still interested, the library still are still committed to this work, and we know that you are a valuable part of this community. So one of the coolest informal leader relationships that I was able to build in my outreach work in Ohio was with an apartment complex manager or a property manager. So, you know, this was mid 2000s, and I was working citywide in some targeted neighborhoods, um, but it was basically starting from scratch in terms of there not being any already existing library relationships within the Latino community, which is who I was looking to reach specifically the time that I started that. And I'm not an insider of that community. I already told you guys like how I grew up, right? So um, there was definitely some creative approaches that I took to try to find the people that I wanted to talk to. And one of them was that I would look in the Spanish language newspaper for apartment complexes that advertised in Spanish in the neighborhoods that I was targeting. Because one of the things that I knew from what um, like what I had learned through Reforma and these leaders who had come before me um, was that people didn't necessarily always feel safe coming into the library. So I was thinking like, wow, it would be cool if we could do something, in a neighborhood. And if people are, in an apartment complex that might have facilities, wouldn't it be cool if there was something we could do there? So that's what prompted that. And I got a lot of no, so I had to like pick myself up and like just not take it personally and be like, oh, okay, I'll keep trying, um, in that process. But eventually I connected with this property manager who was Latina. Majority of her residents were first generation Latino immigrants, and she already knew about the library. I didn't know that before I met with her, but and she didn't know all that the library did, but it wasn't hard um, to make the sell on, like that there are things that the library has to offer that are useful to her residents also. And she had the idea of, how about you bring me Spanish language information about the library and library card applications, and I'll put them in the new move-in packets. And I mean, how awesome, right? So people are they're moving in and they're getting their information about how to set up their utilities and how to get their mail and blah, blah, blah. And boom, right then and there in that same folder is the library as well. So, I brought a bunch of stuff up and we sat in her office. So on another time that we met and stuffed those envelopes together. And as we were doing that, of course, we're having this sort of informal um, conversation, right? So an interview doesn't always have to be like formal. You can even substitute the word interview for conversation sometimes if that like is helpful within um, just in terms of how to think about it. But she was telling me about different events that they did there for families, and it started off with me coming to represent the library and bringing giveaways, bringing crafts, doing story time, blah blah blah, and then eventually making that connection to the local branch, and in order for it to be continued. So yeah, these individuals are the folks who are trusted and who interact with people on a regular basis, and who can give you a lot of information about what day-to-day life is like that you might not otherwise know. All right, number 2, take story time out of the library, right? We might already be doing this in some organizations. If we are, where are we going? Who are we serving? Who are we not serving? Are we reaching parents as well, or just kids with our outreach story times? These are all things to think about. There are a lot of benefits, of course, to us to have story time inside of the library building, but again, access isn't necessarily equitable for all groups. So if we can bring story time outside of the library to places that are already trusted by our target audience, then we can increase both inclusion and access. So there's all kinds of places to think about, right? And it's going to be different for every single community. But places like schools, businesses, festivals, health clinics, churches, as we've learned through how we've rapidly shifted how we deliver story time with COVID, even virtual programming can extend our reach beyond some of the people who make it into the physical library building. So I want to tell you guys about Suhei Lugo, who is a children's librarian at Boston Public Library. I don't know if there's anybody from Boston in the group, but man, I'm just such a fan of Suhei's work. Like, she inspires me all the time, and there's more awesome stuff that she has going on, even in the last year or 2 years, than I could put up here. But I want to highlight specifically a couple of things that she's been a part of organizing in the era of COVID. So non-virtual ways to bring literacy and other relevant resources to the community in the era of COVID. And you can tell from the images here, one of the first ones was working together with volunteers and local businesses in terms of getting the materials and putting together these care packs that were distributed to local families. So each one of these care packs had masks, hygiene products, notebook, books, coloring pages, local resources, and other things. So things that speak to the literacy needs of young children in the community, and also speak to the broader family health needs during this time of pandemic, and working with local businesses to get those materials put together and distributed to families in the community. So I just absolutely love this. I thought that was it's so relevant, I mean, and this is not in any way like saying virtual story time doesn't matter, don't do it. But there is because there's a lot of value. And I think that now that we've seen that virtual story time is something that we can do, I think that we will see that continue and should continue, long after this epidemic ends, or whatever, it does whatever it is that it's going to do. But this is just so relevant, so timely, so like it just so outside of the box of that sort of like swift call that was widely adopted, among libraries everywhere, of like, let's take story time and put it online. And this is, let's get books and other necessary information that's going to speak to, the quality of life of the families in our neighborhood in this way. So really cool example. And then the other one is with a story walk, right? Because story time can be something that we do together as a group, and it can also be something that groups independent of the library do together, or that families do together. And so this story walk uses the book A is for Activist, and it looks like it's just the English version, but this book is also available in Spanish too. But Suhei worked with local service agencies and businesses, especially prioritizing minority-owned businesses, to be places for the maps, or places that were stops along the story walk in this neighborhood. So, just another really creative way to take story time out of the library, even in the age of COVID. And along the way, either be connecting people with useful resources or businesses that they may not know that exist within their community, or connecting folks who are using those businesses, using those resources that may not be aware of the library, back to the library in this really visual and interactive and community focused kind of a way. And then the last, number 3 on my outreach steps for setting your bilingual story time up for success is collaborating with community partners. So this is similar to finding those community leaders, but that's really about looking for specific individuals, and community partners is thinking more about organizations. So if the library is seeing, we have a growing Nepali immigrant community, and we're having some challenges in navigating how to best serve that community. You are not the only ones, right? The health department, local businesses, the school system. I mean, if the library is noticing a demographic shift, then there are so many other organizations that are also noticing that shift, and connecting with those organizations, especially if your missions are similarly aligned, can be really, really useful, because you can learn from those folks, right? Like, how are you serving this community? um, what has worked, what hasn't worked, what has surprised you. You can learn from their perspective about how, what the work is that they're doing, and how they are also delivering their services, whether they are services for the whole community, like say a school that's noticing population change within that whole community, or whether these are agencies that are set up kind of like the Latin Hope Center that I told you about, that are really emerging specifically to address unmet community needs specifically by that target community. So there, just like with the community leaders, you want to show up, provide tools that can help them with their ongoing work, and just keep that relationship going. And that's how you start to build trust. And this is especially important if this partner or potential partner organization or community organization, really does have good relationships with the community that you are trying to reach. Because if those community partners become more aware of what you do, feel like they can trust you, and have a rapport with you, but also trust the organization to treat folks well, and to have materials that are going to meet people's needs, then they can start to, and they'll start to refer people to you. So, imagine a health clinic, um, and a child has recently been diagnosed with autism or something like that. I know that the library would be a really great resource for you to connect with. They have books there that could be really useful for you, just to kind of help you learn a little bit more at your own pace about things you can do at home. And they have those materials in other languages. They can also help you find health information online in other languages. And they even have a sensory story time that is specifically designed, for kids like your child who, you know, need less stimulation, or whatever it is. Like, if people know about what you've got going on and they trust you, then they'll just be another voice out there in the community is spreading the word. And when you have those relationships within with community partners as well, those are awesome people to call on for collaboration, right? For special projects. Hey, I think it would be really great to put together packs of um, literacy materials to actually get to families in our neighborhood. But I'm thinking, we should have some health stuff as well. You know, what do you recommend? What do you have to offer? We have all these masks that were just recently donated, unused cloth masks, hand sanitizer, whatever. We would love to contribute those to your project. I don't know if that's how things went down for Suhei. I'm just using that as an example. Once we have those relationships, then we can work together to meet our our missions simultaneously, and to reach even more people and to reach those folks better than we could if we're operating from our own individual silos. And if those folks have, or if those agencies have people who are, insiders to that community that you're trying to reach, who can, or have a lot of cultural knowledge about that community, they can just help you fill in gaps, perhaps in language skills, as well as cultural understanding. So the collaboration opportunities are far beyond, what I could even imagine. One of my favorite um, examples, this is in the realm of health too, but when I remember hearing about this from Jose Aponte when he was the director of the San Diego Public Library. And I don't know if it was San Diego that did this, but it was the coolest idea. They had like a retrofitted taco truck that was made into like a public health slash bookmobile combination that would go out into Latino neighborhoods. And they were able, the public health folks were able to do things on their side, like, quick checkups or immunizations or whatever. And then the library folks were able to do stuff on their side, whether that meant checking books out there on site, or having something entertaining for kiddos to do while their parents are talking with the public health people or whatever. But I mean, this was like a decade and a half ago that I heard about that. So there's lots of examples of people doing creative things, and as we connect with community partners, we'll have even more creative ideas arise than we can name right now. So quickly on this one, I want to give you one more kind of case study or example. This was from my work here in Kentucky, but instead of being from the perspective of being the library trying to do outreach, and reaching out to another organization to learn and build trust, it was being on the flip side. The library was the trusted place within the Latino community. And so the local school system came to us because they were having difficulty getting Latino children registered for kindergarten in time. And, we kind of talked about, well, why is this happening and what's going on, and identified several different barriers. A lot of it, the person who said the DMV thing, this is immediately what I thought of. Like, people didn't know what the paperwork, the stuff that you have to bring, to register your kid for school. It's not something that people necessarily know, and that information wasn't getting out to them for them to be able to show up ready to go with it. There was also, a lack of, there were Spanish speaking staff at the school, but not a ton. And there was also a new-ish requirement at that time that kids had to have a dental examination and be able to provide proof of that as part of what they needed to register for kindergarten too. And so we brainstormed and we came up with this kind of grand scale kindergarten registration day event that was held at the library, which was a place where people already felt safe and felt comfortable. And we had an awesome network of volunteers who spoke Spanish. So we had people who were able to sit down one-on-one with families and help them fill out the paperwork that they needed to fill out, take it up to the school. We had youth services folks talking through the school readiness skills as the parents were leaving and giving them materials they could use at home and kind of showing them a little bit of how to use it. And we partnered with a dentist that has an outreach initiative from it was a dentist from another city. And so there was a dental van on site in the parking lot. So if kids didn't have that dental examination already, they could go right on up onto the dental van with their parents, of course, and get that dental exam and then be able to have that documentation. So that in one fell swoop in one day, I think it was very time consuming, and I think we held this for a total of like 3 hours, but we were able to get like 40 families registered for kindergarten within that one event, which was really cool. And then it's something that the library continued to run with and do annually, and that even expanded out to other branches. So again, that's just another one of those examples of you don't know what creative things you'll come up with to meet community need and to do your work the best that you can by working together until you make those relationships and then just see what's possible. So let's take a couple of minutes to pull the chat back up again. And if folks do feel comfortable sharing this to the whole group, that would be my preference. Based on what you've heard, just think about your own community. And, we don't have to have giant paragraphs or a whole bunch of stuff, but one or two people, and kind of give us some idea of where that person is from, like, so potential community leaders or community organizations that you can think about collaborating with, to gain trust, to get story time out of the library, to meet families and serve families in places where they feel, where they already feel safe. And by sharing it to the whole group, it might help to generate some ideas for some of your colleagues as well. So just kind of thinking about your local community. If you had to start somewhere tomorrow, where would it be? family resource centers, definitely. We have those in Kentucky as well. I know not every state does, but those are really useful. Local preschools, ESL classes, Creative Start organization. There's a family network in another town that has a Spanish playgroup. Um, this actually is a really great point that this person I'm just going to comment on this as things come in. Um, as I've mentioned repeatedly, you know, every community is different, and sometimes it can be really helpful to look outside of your specific community. So for example, in Kentucky, I think we have the second highest number of counties of any state in the country. We have 120 counties in Kentucky, and most public libraries are at the county level. So, you know, if someone is in the neighboring county, um, and it's, you know, more rural, and they're having trouble getting started, it might really serve them to reach out to their neighboring larger um, county to talk with. Maybe there's a library there that's doing a really great job, and maybe that's a place that they can start with a community leader interview, because more likely than not, some of the distinctions that we have that divide up our service areas aren't necessarily distinctions that cut people's lives up in the same way. So even if not everything is applicable, we can still find really useful information from agencies and individuals outside of our specific region. And just because someone is outside of our specific region, that doesn't mean that they don't know people that we should talk to within our region. So that was a really nice point there. Early childhood councils, um, family networks, yeah, parents groups, great. So I'm going to move on. Those can keep coming in a little bit. Um, but, you know, even though there's so much value in doing this work, it doesn't always necessarily mean that it's easy, right? And there are real issues that we face within our workplaces that might make this work challenging. Even if we are fully bought in, we're 100% like, I get it, I am ready to go, I don't fully know what I'm doing yet, but I am ready to go, you know. There are real challenges, so let's name them. Let's name them and um, flip them. You know, look at the challenge and look for the opportunity within the challenge. And I want to make sure that we have plenty of time for questions. So I'm just going to move through these quickly. So most obvious challenge, right? COVID-19, right? How do I connect with people individually or, you know, on a personal level in the middle of this worldwide health pandemic? Well, opportunities there, I would say, this is a great place or a great time to look and see who's rising up to really help meet the health needs of the group that the community that you are hoping to serve. These people are probably very overwhelmed right now, but you know, still, like, even if we pull it back a step or two, there might be groups that are rising sort of to the forefront and how they're responding to this pandemic, that can point us in a direction of who it is that we should be contacting. We also are in this world where people are really comfortable working, you know, remotely now, right? So everybody has had to adapt what they do to use Zoom or, rely more on email and things like that. So, it's not, um, I think that can be an opportunity as well. Um, just making it perhaps easier to connect with people in some ways. And finally, if there is someone that you want to, um, to talk with, a leader that you've identified, you know, what a great opportunity to socially distance and meet outside, maybe in a park or, you know, somewhere in the area of the community, even just going for a walk in the neighborhood of the community that you are trying to target with your program, because that's going to give you an opportunity to have just to see more and learn more about the folks that you're trying to reach. Lack of time, right? Lack of time, which really isn't a lack of time. It's how we prioritize our time and how we're structured in terms of our staffing. And I don't mean we as in you, how you prioritize your time. It might be you, but it also might be that there are a lot of responsibilities that are on your shoulders, that could be on other people's shoulders, right? There might be I don't know. Do children's librarians have to be the ones that are weeding all of the children's collection? I don't know. I would think it's worth asking these questions because I don't know. What do we value more? Weeding or access, And again, I want to be the one in there, like, with the stick kind of poking the bear a little bit. It's not that there's a one size fits all answer to this question all the time, but what I will say in terms of opportunity is COVID-19 has shown us very clearly in a way that we cannot ever unsee that we can change, and we can change fast, and we do not have to continue to do things the way that we have always done them when more pressing needs arise. So yeah, it's a challenge, but that's a challenge that we can take on. Our own discomfort. Man, do I get this. Seriously, I would spend hours practicing my bilingual story times. I was terrified when I started doing this work that, you know, that that my Spanish isn't good enough. Mind you, I worked in public libraries using Spanish 50 to 100% of the time for 7 years. So, it was good enough. It's, but I was just hypercritical, hyper perfectionistic, and scared, and so scared of like letting the library down or offending someone. And you know my personal discomfort was definitely an impediment to me being able to successfully and authentically connect with families, especially at the beginning of doing this work. And what really, really, really helped for me was eventually one day I got it, like, this is not about me. This isn't about me and how good I am, right? There is I can't wait for the day when like this work is so ubiquitous that I don't get hired or paid a single dime to do this particular consulting work ever again. But there are so many libraries and communities where there are immigrant communities and there are folks who speak languages other than English that are not represented within the library staff. And, if we just wait for the perfect structure for those people to have access or have service, I think we're really failing in our mission. So yeah, it's worth it for me to push myself out of my comfort zone in order to do my part, because it's my responsibility too, right? Like, to make sure that access is equitable within this community. And so that really, really was helpful for me. And then just a sense of humor too, just not taking myself so seriously, which just comes with time, definitely for me anyway. And one more thing to be aware of, that is a challenge but can also be an opportunity, is that it is very easy to overburden our diverse or insider staff. If we know there's a growing Chinese community, and so we have a Chinese staff person, one, right? And so now that person is going to do all of our translation, do all of our outreach, go to all of the events where we want to show what we're doing for the Chinese community, help with collection development, do any programming that we want done. That is a huge, huge amount of responsibility to put on one person's shoulders. So for folk, and it's not uncommon. It's not uncommon at all. So for folks who find themselves in that situation, maintain your boundaries. Do not ever work off the clock, and prioritize your self-care. That's important. That's absolutely important. And for folks who see that happening, the opportunity is really for you, to reach out to those staff, like, you are doing such an awesome job reaching the Chinese speaking community. I see all these relationships that you have been building, and it is awesome. And I know that I don't speak Chinese, but like, I want to support you in this work, so if there's anything that I can ever take off of your plate, things that I can do so that you have more time to be able to do some of the other work that you're doing or whatever, I want to show up for you and do that. I want to learn about what this community needs so that it's not just you. And then, you can build a coalition. And when there's a coalition of people who are all working to provide equitable access, then it's not just one individual person's responsibility, right? It's an institutional value. And so that's really the opportunity for the other folks who might be in the dominant group. So let's bring it all back to story time, right? This is a workshop of bilingual story time. This is how you set your bilingual story time up for success, especially if you're trying to reach a community that is not yet connected to the library. This is what it's all about. So I'm going to play for us a video from Grace Lynn that's going to kind of help shift our mindset from outreach sort of more into the world of children's literature. And as I'm doing that, I would love it if folks would put into the chat box one commitment to outreach. And small is fine. Make it something tangible. Make it something rather than something ginormous and lofty. Like, what is something that you could actually do within the next month? One commitment to outreach and in the box so we can see it and be inspired by one another. And Grace Lynn is going to talk to us a little bit about windows and mirrors and the importance of inclusion in children's literature while we seal those commitments in.
My very first book, The Ugly Vegetables, it's a story about a girl and her mother, and her mother grows Chinese vegetables in her garden while everybody else in the neighborhood grows flowers. And the little girl is very embarrassed because they're obviously Chinese American or Asian American in the story. And this is very much based on my childhood. I think one of the things that I did when I wrote my first story was to write what you know, just following those old mantras, write what you know. And after I wrote this book, and it was actually a relative success, I was really proud of it. But what was happening was I started getting letters, or parents would say, "Oh, I've been looking so hard for a book just like this with an Asian American character where there's somebody that looks just like my daughter or just like my son." And then I started thinking about myself, and I started thinking about how I grew up, and I remembered how I used to feel very much alone because I grew up in upstate New York, where there was not a lot of Asians. In fact, we were the only Asian family in our neighborhood. I was definitely the only Asian girl in my classroom. And most of the time, I just forgot about it. Most of the time, I just pretended that I wasn't Asian. In fact, I remember walking past a window, and I would see my reflection in the window, and I'd be like, "Oh, there's a Chinese girl." And I'd be like, "Oh, wait, that's me." Because most of the time, I would just forget that I was Asian. And I think one of the reasons why I did that was because I loved books when I was younger, and all the books that I read never had anybody that looked like me in them. And I realized that if there had been, maybe I wouldn't have felt so alone. I wouldn't have wanted to forget that I was Asian so much. And so that's something that is a mirror. These books are very much a mirror of my life when I was younger. And as a window, I hope as a window, when I was younger, I tell this story quite often. As I said, I always tried to pretend that I wasn't Asian. I always would forget that I was Asian. And most of the time that worked. Most of the time I just forgot that I was. And I thought I was just like everybody else in my classroom. And then my 5th grade class decided to put on the play The Wizard of Oz. And all the girls in my class really wanted to be Dorothy. And I really wanted to be Dorothy too. So every day out on the schoolyard, all the girls that were going to try out for Dorothy would stand in a circle, and we'd all sing Somewhere Over the Rainbow over and over and over again, practicing for the audition. And then finally, on the day of the audition, we are standing in that circle one last time practicing, and I turned to the girl next to me and I said, "Hey, today's the audition. Do you think they might choose me to be Dorothy?" And she looked at me and she said, "But you can't be Dorothy. Dorothy's not Chinese." And I remember I felt so stupid, and I remember feeling like, oh my gosh, she's right. I'm Asian, I'm Chinese, there's no way I could ever be Dorothy. And when it was time for the audition, when they called my name, I didn't even try out. I just shook my head and I said, no, forget it. It'd be so stupid for Dorothy to be Chinese. And so what I hope for my books is not only is it a mirror of my childhood so that kids who were like me can see themselves and not feel so alone. I also hope it's a mirror, a window for those who are not Asian, who are not of a minority race, and they can see other races, and they realize, oh, they are just like me, even though they may look different. We're very similar, and you know what? Dorothy could have been Chinese. So that's kind of how I feel my books are both windows and mirrors.
So we'll talk more about this idea of windows and mirrors, which comes from scholar Rudine Sims Bishop in our next session. And speaking of our next session, I want to give you guys a little preview of where we're going, right? So today was all about outreach and being involved with the community and gaining trust. And our next session, which is on Friday the 25th, we are going to get into the details of bilingual story time. And so whether you are planning on doing a fully bilingual story time, whether you want to do a monolingual story time in another language, whether you want to do an English language story time and make it intentionally more inclusive of other languages and cultures, all of that is going to be in there, and we're going to, you know, go through books and music and rhymes and you know, all of that kind of fun stuff. And if there is a specific language or cultural group that you know for sure that you are looking for resources on, please do just send me a message in the chat, or you can email me so that I have that on my radar. I'm planning to cover quite a bit of territory with that, but you know, if there are specific needs in the group, let's make sure to get them addressed. And you guys have homework for between now and then. It should actually be pretty fun to work on. So I'm gonna I'm gonna come out of the full screen presentation here and show you guys, and I have to do this thing too, sorry. My Zoom bar always winds up like right on the tabs that I need. We're going to use Flipgrid, which is a really cool tool that I didn't know until Kim told me about it. But what I want you guys to do, there's a Flipgrid page set up for us, and we're going to do a diverse talk speed date. Or diverse book speed date. So there are resources on your resource handouts, 3 that I really, obviously book awards are a great place to find diverse books. 3 other resources outside of awards lists are We Need Diverse Books, which I think is probably the easiest to use and just one of the best resources out there for finding diverse books. Kirkus Collections and Kirkus Reviews in general, because they do a really great job at having a very diverse staff that are the ones who are reviewing the books, and they explicitly name race, ethnicity, skin tone wherever possible in all of their reviews. And the Diverse Book Finder as well is a really great tool for finding diverse books. But however you find them, I want all of us to pick a really awesome, diverse book, especially if it's own voices, meaning that either the author or the illustrator or both is you know, an insider to the group that's being represented or portrayed in the book. And just record yourself doing a really short book talk. So the instructions are here on the Flipgrid page. And I believe I have the link to we'll make sure that for sure you guys get the link to the Flipgrid page and whatever it is that you need to do it. If you can find a book trailer that's already been made and you want to put that in instead of recording yourself doing a book talk, totally fine. Basically, what the hope would be that we can all visit essentially this gallery that's been made prior to our next session together and just get really, really excited about cool, diverse books that our colleagues love, that maybe we aren't familiar with, that we think would be really great to use in story time. And so, yeah, don't put tons of pressure on yourself. Keep this low key. It should be fun. And it's just a great way to share books, which I know we all love to do. And so I'm going to share a book trailer for the one that I selected to kind of kick this off with you guys. It's called Now That I'm Here by Erin Mashon. So I love that book so much, and you can tell. I know the video can be choppy. Sometimes that's just the nature of working on Zoom. Usually it's the talking that matters more than the images. But I still wanted to show that to you guys because when I first picked this book up. I mean, it's a book about family, right? It's a book about adults adjusting to how their lives get turned upside down when they have a kid. And 3-year-old, so, familiar theme for me. Um, but my family is an interracial family. My husband is Japanese American and I'm white American, and our daughter is bicultural. And I didn't even realize until I saw that book. And in that book, it's the Japanese mom of Japanese heritage and dad who is white. But there's just so many little things in that book that just I was like I didn't even know that I was missing seeing that until I saw it, and I just remember being so moved the first time that I saw it, and am so grateful for my daughter that she would be able to see, uh, you know, coffee and ramen and the onsen and just all these just little different cultural cues that live inside of our home, also living inside of a picture book. So that's why I picked that one to share with you guys. So we still have some time, and I am here to serve you with the remainder of the time that we have left in whatever way I can best do that. So questions, um, concerns, thoughts, ideas, just put it in the box, either to me privately or to the whole group, and I will do my best to be of assistance. You're welcome for providing the subtitles. I will say I did not know that that was something that Google Slides could do until earlier this year. I was doing some work with Brooklyn Public, and so now I design all of my PowerPoints uh, in Google Slides for that reason, especially if they're being recorded. I have to remember to re-click it if I go out, but yeah, you're welcome. I was happy to find out that that kind of accessibility tool is available as well. I swear I'm nice, and I really like answering questions, and you you don't have to hold back if there's anything that you want to ask about. So if you're thinking, and someone else probably is too, so it's okay. Are we going to have access to the slides? I don't plan on sharing the slides, but you will have access to the video, as well as to the resources handout that I that I put together. So if there's a need for the slides, I might be able to put those together in a PDF to share with people. Interesting question. This is a marketing question, and I'm assuming that this is coming around bilingual story time that's in English and Spanish. And so we might talk about this more when we meet again next time. But it says maybe silly, but is it okay to sell the program for English students to learn Spanish as well as vice versa? Yeah, here's what I would say. What is your intention? You know, what is the reason why we are creating this this program, and who do we want it to reach? And then, you know, try to hone in and stay close to that intention with everything that you're doing. And if part of what you're wanting to do is bring together an integrated group of families, especially if you live in a place like I do that is still very largely segregated along race lines, along culture lines, along socioeconomic status. You know, absolutely part of the value of bilingual story time is that it can bring together people who may not otherwise interact. So, you know, I hope that that is a useful answer, you know, just to know why you're doing what you're doing, and always kind of come back to that as sort of the true north when you're thinking about how you want to get it out into the community. It's great that people are processing, totally get that. You know, you can always reach out to me. I've provided you a myriad of ways to contact me. I'm not hard to find. So, you know, we can continue to talk. And thank you to the person who shared information with me about other languages that are being spoken by the community that you're trying to reach. And I will make sure that that I speak to that in the resources and materials that that I include in the next session. So cool. All right. I think that I'm going to go ahead and stop my screen share here, Kim, and turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Katie. You know, there's not a whole lot left to go from here. So I want to thank everybody, our Connecticut friends, our Massachusetts friends, our Rhode Island friends, for being here and just absorbing and wanting to do this work. We will be meeting again next Friday, the 25th. I'll make sure that I email the links and the code from Katie's slide for everyone to access the Flipgrid. I've used Flipgrid before. If you run into any issues, feel free to email me. And we are looking forward to seeing you all on Friday the 25th. I'm going to stop recording now because I can never remember